And if a town needs female companionship, hijacking them seems the natural thing to do. And if two partners want to share the same wife, why not?
In 1969, two of Hollywood's most macho alpha males shocked the world by doing the unthinkable, starring in a musical. But behind the chaotic curtains of Paint Your Wagon was a hidden truth. Lee Marvin harbored a secret about Clint Eastwood that would prove to audiences and his Adams that they really didn't know him at all. What did the ultimate tough guy truly see in Hollywood's rising icon? Let's find out. A secret hidden in plain sight. In 1969, Hollywood executives pulled off one of the craziest experiments in cinematic history by taking the two most terrifying hyper-masculine actors on the planet and putting them into a big-budget musical called Paint Your Wagon. Instead of blowing away outlaws with 6 shooters, Lee Marvin and Clint Eastwood spent months in the wilderness, singing. For audiences used to seeing these men in all macho and covered in blood and gun smoke, this was a completely new sight for them. It was a bizarre and even funny cinematic twist, if you had asked anyone who saw the musical at the time. After the musical wrapped up, Lee Marvin dropped a legendary line that nobody unexpected. He mentioned that Clint Eastwood was the only man he knew in Hollywood who sang worse than he did. On the surface, the public laughed it off as a playful banter between two competing alpha males. People figured Marvin was throwing a little bit of shade at his younger co-stars, but the reality was far more fascinating. While the mainstream public saw a chaotic movie set, Marvin saw right through Eastwood's carefully curated man-with-no-name armor. At that point in time, the world saw Eastwood as the ultimate mysterious cowboy. He was the cold, quiet enigma of the Western genre who built his fame on saying as little as possible. Everyone assumed he was a simple television actor who got lucky in European cinema. Marvin was one person who realized early on that the silence wasn't a limitation, but calculation. Behind those squinting eyes was a creative genius waiting for the right moment to strike. Marvin unlocked a hidden truth about the rising icon that day, but it was just a secret that left the entertainment industry completely stunned once it finally came to light. To understand the gravity of Marvin's realization, we have to look at who these men were before they met in the mud of Oregon. The wildly different paths that forged these two titans would define the future of American cinema. The battle-scarred veteran versus the studio golden boy. Lee Marvin never had to act tough because he already knew what real terror felt like. Long before he ever set foot on a Hollywood stage, he was a United States Marine fighting in the Pacific theater of World War II. During the bloody Battle of Saipan, Japanese fire tore into his hip, wounding his sciatic nerve and changing his life forever. He spent up to 13 months recovering in military hospitals, an experience that left him with emotional and mental scars. Because of those scars, Marvin held a deep disdain for Hollywood phonies. He couldn't stand actors who feigned bravery for a paycheck without ever knowing what it was like to experience real danger. But life was not the same for our mystery cowboy. Clint Eastwood grew up in a completely different world. While Marvin was surviving the horrors of the Pacific, Eastwood spent time around California swimming pools and working his way up through the industry. He eventually found massive success through the rigid, structured television schedule of Rawhide. By the late 1960s, Eastwood was establishing himself as the ultimate quiet, calculated, and stoic screen presence. He didn't need to yell or throw explosive punches to command a scene. All he had was a cold, icy stare and deafening silence. To a battle-hardened veteran, this younger actor looked incredibly suspicious. Marvin was deeply skeptical of a star who based his entire career on silence rather than raw emotion. He suspected Eastwood might be all smoke and mirrors, a pretty face manufactured by the studios. Paramount Pictures executives were incredibly anxious about putting these two conflicting personalities into the same production. They knew they were playing with fire by matching a volatile, unpredictable veteran with a calculated newcomer. The entire industry watched with nervous anticipation, expecting an immediate clash of egos that could ruin the project. Two titans from two completely different realities were about to collide. The location Paramount chose for this experiment was nothing short of a multi-million-dollar hell. Combining these two men in one production was expensive. They poured in a whopping $20 million, which made it one of the most expensive and financially risky gambles in Hollywood history at the time. Instead of staying safely inside a comfortable studio, executives picked a remote forest near Baker City, Oregon. The area was completely cut off from any form of civilization. Carpenters and crew members spent months building an entire gold rush settlement called No Name City, completely from scratch, right there in the dense wilderness. The wilderness soon became hostile. Logistical nightmares plagued the project daily, from extreme weather conditions that caught everyone off guard to mudstorms that swamped the valley, ruining expensive equipment and washing out the roads. As the production schedule bloated weeks past the deadline, the isolation and physical toll began driving the crew to absolute madness. The cast and crew were cold, wet, and thoroughly exhausted. These brutal conditions had a strange effect on the cast. The endless filming delays forced Marvin and Clint Eastwood into a tough situation. They couldn't retreat to their luxury trailers because the terrain made it impossible to bring them in. Instead, they had to sit together on wooden crates, sharing space for hours on end while waiting for the storms to pass. This shared misery began to chip away at their professional defenses, forcing them to relate more closely. Marvin stopped viewing Eastwood as a pampered studio creation, while Eastwood figured out how to handle Marvin's explosive personality. They realized they were the only two people who understood the pressure they were under, paving the way for an unexpected alliance. Stranded in the mud, the two actors realized they were trapped in a disaster. And that's when their fundamentally incompatible lifestyles became impossible to ignore. The bizarre on-set lifestyles. Marvin lived his life on the edge, especially when the cameras were about to roll. Every single day on the Oregon set, he consumed massive quantities of alcohol during active filming hours. He completely ignored studio rules, and his heavy drinking fueled wild antics that left the crew absolutely in shock. In one famous incident, Marvin got entirely intoxicated and decided to ride a horse backward right through the deep mud of the town square. He spent his evenings roaring through local bars, loudly mocking the Hollywood elite and treating the multi-million-dollar production like it was some kind of joke. As you'd expect, Clint Eastwood was the complete opposite, living life completely different. Eastwood was more of the disciplined one, and you could tell from his diet and overall strict health regimen that was decades ahead of its time. He woke up early to jog, and yes, you could tell because of how fit he looked. Rather than join in the nightly partying, he'd quietly retreated to his trailer. He spent his hours reading scripts and deeply analyzing directorial techniques, watching the massive financial waste and the messy scheduling around him, and taking quiet notes on exactly what not to do as a future filmmaker. This total contrast between the two actors was something everyone noticed on set. It was more interesting as the crew sort of expected two massive alpha males with opposite lifestyles to tear each other apart, but they never did. Marvin's unpredictable energy and Eastwood's quiet discipline actually brought them closer together. They found each other endlessly fascinating. As the days went by, they formed a friendship based on mutual curiosity. What followed was a creative compromise that would produce the strangest musical tracks in cinematic history. The absurdity of the songs. From there on, what followed was a creative compromise that would produce the strangest musical tracks in cinematic history. Neither Marvin nor Eastwood had any formal vocal training. Typically, studios hire professional vocalists to secretly record over an actor's voice, but both actors fiercely rejected this option. They demanded that audiences hear their actual, unaltered voices, no matter how unpolished the performances would turn out to be. This stubborn pride resulted in two completely opposite musical styles that baffled audiences till this day. Marvin tackled a song called "Wand'rin' Star" with a deep bass delivery. Not only that, it was a heavy, sorrowful performance, and Clint Eastwood took a radically different path for his big solo, "I Talk to the Trees." Instead of his trademark gritty cowboy persona, he delivered a surprisingly soft, airy, and vulnerable croon. He was obviously away from his comfort zone and his action movie fanbase, who expected a rugged alpha male and got a rather sensitive singer. It was a new side of him they were willing to accept. Behind the scenes, the two stars fully recognized the comedy of their situation. During filming breaks, they huddled together off-camera, laughing hysterically at the sheer ridiculousness of two of the toughest guys in Hollywood singing emotional melodies to nature. Instead of letting the bizarre project damage their egos, it got them closer and closer. They realized that the only way to survive this chaotic production was to leave their pride behind and fully lean into the absurdity together. Their gamble ended up making music history in a way no studio executive could have predicted. Marvin's recording of Wand'rin' Star became a massive international hit. The track climbed all the way to #1 on the UK singles charts, staying there for 3 weeks. In a jaw-dropping twist, an untrained actor singing a cowboy ballad famously knocked the Beatles' legendary song Let It Be right off the top spot. But the musical numbers weren't the only boundary-pushing element of this film. The script contained a shocking narrative choice that threatened to alienate audiences entirely. The scandalous script no one expected. Screenwriter Paddy Chayefsky penned a controversial storyline that felt incredibly scandalous for a late 1960s Western. Instead of a typical, clean frontier romance, the movie featured a light-hearted portrayal of polyamory and a literal three-way relationship right in the middle of the Old West. The plot of the movie focuses on Lee Marvin's character, Ben, who buys a wife named Elizabeth from a traveler. Later in the story, rather than fighting a bloody duel over her affection, Ben willingly and legally agrees to share his wife with Clint Eastwood's character, Pardner. This progressive, highly unusual relationship arrangement was incredibly radical for a mainstream Hollywood studio in 1969. The film industry had only recently implemented the new MPAA rating system to replace old censorship laws, and Paramount Pictures was taking a huge financial risk by testing the boundaries of what everyday moviegoers would tolerate. Traditional Westerns always relied on clear rules of romance, honor, and territory, where tough men fought aggressively to claim the women they loved. Paint Your Wagon completely threw that entire cinematic playbook out the window, substituting traditional gunfights with an open marriage. What could have easily turned into a hotbed of toxic alpha male competition on the remote set actually became a masterclass in collaboration. Instead of letting real-world ego or jealousy ruin their working relationship, Marvin and Eastwood approached this potentially scandalous plotline with impeccable comedic timing. It was this unique narrative choice that forced the two actors to build an on-screen and off-screen dynamic rooted in deep mutual respect. They completely shattered the standard hyper-masculine tropes that had defined cowboy movies for decades. They showed the world that two ultimate tough guys could share the spotlight and a wife without pulling punches or firing weapons. By sharing the screen and the plot so intimately, Marvin finally saw through Eastwood's quiet demeanor and discovered a calculated genius that the rest of Hollywood completely missed. The revelation, the secret Marvin unlocked, changed how he viewed his co-star forever. Clint Eastwood's trademark silence wasn't exactly a performative acting strategy. At the time, major executives thought Eastwood was a handsome television actor who happened to get lucky with a few European cowboy movies. Industry insiders figured he remained quiet because he lacked dramatic range, but Marvin saw the truth. The younger actor used his quietness to blend into the background, turning himself into an observer on a highly dysfunctional set. While the rest of the crew complained about the daily disasters, Eastwood carefully studied every single mistake made by director Joshua Logan and producer Alan J. Lerner. The project was a waste, as it drained the money that went into production and lost weeks due to poor planning. Eastwood did not argue with the directors or throw tantrums. Marvin noticed that Eastwood was using his time on this big-budget studio project to prepare for his true goal, which was running his own independent production company called Malpaso. In private, Marvin offered high praise for his co-star, realizing Clint functioned as a creative inlet. While everyone else was distracted by the endless chaos, Eastwood quietly absorbed the deep mechanics of filmmaking. He spent hours studying lighting setups, camera movements, and story pacing. This reality created a sharp contrast between the two stars. Marvin was notoriously self-destructive, living hard in the moment, while Eastwood possessed a hyper-focused ambition to seize total control over his artistic destiny. He refused to remain a pawn for studio executives, wanting instead to call the shots. Marvin knew Clint was destined to rule Hollywood from behind the camera, and it didn't take long for Eastwood to prove his older co-star completely right. When Paint Your Wagon finally hit theaters, the commercial response was devastating. The film became a box office disappointment, failing to make back its staggering $20 million budget. For Paramount Pictures, it was a financial disaster that signaled the end of the old-school studio musical era. For the two main stars, the movie's failure marked the official crossroad of their cinematic careers. Lee Marvin was paid $1 million for his role and used this chaotic aftermath to change his pace. He began a gradual transition into veteran elder statesman roles, choosing specific projects that required less physical toll before eventually stepping away from the intense Hollywood grind entirely. He had already survived a real war and decades of movie stardom, and he felt content letting a younger generation take over the heavy lifting. Clint Eastwood, as usual, chose a different path, engineering an immediate and aggressive pivot. In 1971, 2 years after the musical fell flat, he made his brilliant directorial debut with the thriller Play Misty for Me. Eastwood took the valuable lessons he gathered while sitting in the Oregon mud and directly applied them to his new role. He implemented extreme efficiency on his sets, establishing a fast-paced directing style that became legendary. He routinely did only 1 or 2 takes for a scene, avoided unnecessary delays, and consistently finished his films well under budget. The cinematic waste he watched in the forest became the perfect blueprint for his own lean production machine. From a safe distance, Marvin watched Eastwood's rapid rise with immense satisfaction. He took quiet pride in watching his former co-star evolve into a premier Hollywood powerhouse actor and director. Those early, playful comments Marvin made about Eastwood's poor singing voice transformed from a public jab into an exclusive badge of honor. The joke became a private symbol of a brutal, shared trial that only the two of them could truly relate to. Even though their careers had drifted into different orbits, the mutual respect built in the mud of Oregon never wavered, surviving all the way to Marvin's final days. The legacy of a uniquely resilient friendship. In the years that followed their musical collaboration, reporters often tried to get Eastwood to talk about Marvin's notorious drinking habits. Eastwood flatly refused to take the bait. He constantly defended his old co-star in public interviews, never allowing aggressive journalists to reduce Marvin to a simple Hollywood drunk. Instead, Eastwood kept the focus on Marvin's raw, unflinching honesty and his absolute command of the silver screen. He knew Marvin was the real deal, an authentic military veteran who never needed to fake his grit for the cameras. Because of that unique bond, Paint Your Wagon stands today as a fascinating cultural artifact. High-budget flaws aside, the film remains a rare look at the deep vulnerability of two tough-guy legends. It provided a strange glimpse behind their hyper-masculine images, showing that even the fiercest actors could let their guard down and share a laugh at their own expense. When Marvin passed away in 1987 at the age of 63, it marked the definitive end of an era for American cinema. Hollywood lost one of its last raw, wartime generation actors who understood the massive difference between real-world trauma and movie magic. Yet that legacy did not disappear entirely. Eastwood, now a legendary nonagenarian filmmaker, still carries the precise lessons of discipline and observation he solidified alongside Marvin in the forest. Their time trapped in the mud taught him a lesson that defined the rest of his career. True toughness is not about yelling, making noise, or acting wild. It is more about having the quiet, unstoppable drive to control your own destiny. What is your favorite Clint Eastwood or Lee Marvin movie of all time? Let us know in the comments. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our videos. Thanks for watching.